You arrive in a quiet village nestled at the foot of rolling hills, where the air smells faintly of clay and wood smoke. It's the kind of place where time doesn't run, it strolls. And in the heart of this unhurried place lives a potter, an old man with gentle eyes and soil-stained hands, known not for his wealth nor his fame, but for his curious habit of crafting empty cups. Not just any cups, mind you. These were not meant to hold water, tea, or even coins. They were carved with precision, glazed with care, but always left intentionally hollow of purpose. No adornments, no flourishes, just simple, open cups, placed gently into the hands of those who sought his work. With nothing more than a quiet nod from the potter, you first hear of him from a traveler resting at the inn. She speaks of the way her life shifted after holding one of his cups. It's not what's in it, she says, it's what it reminds you isn't missing. Curious, and perhaps searching for something you haven't yet named, you find yourself at the edge of his small workshop the next morning. The sun filters through woven straw shades, casting delicate patterns on the earthen floor. You step inside. The potter looks up, as if he'd been expecting you. He says little. In fact, he says nothing at all. Instead, he gestures to a small stool beside the wheel and begins to turn the clay in his hands. You watch as something formless begins to take shape, a lump becoming a bowl, the bowl becoming a cup, the cup becoming a vessel for something unseen. You expect him to explain, but he only hands you the cup, freshly made but still damp with life, and looks at you with a kind smile that carries neither command nor question. And so you sit with it. At first, it feels awkward, this half-finished thing. What are you to do with an empty cup? But as you sit longer, your thoughts quiet, your eyes soften. You begin to notice the way the rim fits your palm, the way the curves echo the shape of your own breath. It is empty, yes, but not lacking. It is whole in its emptiness. Later, the potter invites you to walk with him. His voice, when it comes, is like a river that has waited patiently behind stone. I do not fill the cup, he says, because you already carry what it's meant to hold. You walk silently with him through the fields behind his home, where wildflowers bloom without instruction. He tells you stories, not with his voice, but with his gestures, with the way he kneels to brush dirt from a sprouting stem, or the way he lifts a stone to reveal a nest of ants beneath. You understand that the world is full, not because it is brimming with things, but because it knows how to make space for them. Every blossom, every burrow, every breath, opens first before it receives. Back in his workshop, he shows you shelves lined with more empty cups. Some are cracked, some are half-glazed, none are thrown away. An empty cup, he says, is not broken just because it holds nothing yet. He tells you a story then, his first real words strung together in a tale. Once, long ago, he too made grand pieces. Urns, sculptures, teapots with clever spouts and fine detail. People praised him, bought his work, filled his pockets. But one day, he made a simple cup, plain, unadorned, left it on his workbench while attending to other things. And someone passing by picked it up and wept. The potter never knew why. The man had only said, "Thank you for reminding me how much I have." Since then, the potter stopped trying to impress, and instead began to invite. His cups, it seemed, became mirrors. People saw themselves in the emptiness, and remembered what they were still capable of pouring in. You realize now that this visit isn't about clay or craft, but about silence and stillness, about remembering the fullness that comes when you stop grasping. As you prepare to leave, the potter gives you your cup, now fired, solid, warm from the kiln. It fits your hands perfectly. But before you go, he offers you one final truth, his voice barely above the wind. The world will try to fill you with noise. Let your cup remind you that stillness is not emptiness. It is the space where abundance is born. And with that, You step out into the soft evening light. The cup cradled in your hand like a secret. But it isn't a secret at all. It is an invitation. A beginning. A return to something you never truly lost. You carry the cup with care as you walk back through the village. Noticing how the world seems quieter now, though nothing has changed except you. The cobbled path under your feet feels softer. The trees lining the way sway not just with wind but with a kind of whispered awareness. As though they, too, understand the value of holding space rather than filling it. At the inn, you place the cup by your bedside. You don't pour water into it. You don't place coins or flowers or keepsakes inside. You simply let it rest there, unburdened. Its quiet presence reminds you that not every vessel must serve a function to offer meaning. Some things exist just to remind you of what you already carry. That night, you dream, not of grand palaces or wild adventures, but of a single stream that winds its way through an open field. Never rushing, never overflowing, yet always enough. And by the bank sits the potter, legs crossed, a row of cups beside him, each one facing the sky, waiting, not in lack, but in faith. In the morning, you ask the innkeeper about the potter. "Ah," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's been here longer than anyone remembers. People used to think he was strange. Now they travel from far just to sit with him." You nod, understanding, but something inside you whispers that this isn't the end of the story. It's only just unfolding. So you return. The potter greets you with the same silent warmth as before. Today, he hands you a different kind of clay, rougher, darker, more difficult to shape. You glance at him, unsure, but he merely points toward the wheel. You sit, the wheel turns, and the clay resists. Where before the smooth clay danced between your fingers, this lump seems to fight every movement. It cracks, it folds, it refuses to become. You grow frustrated, you want to stop. But then you hear the potter's voice, quiet and steady behind you. Not all abundance is ease. You breathe, and then you begin again, this time not fighting the clay's nature, but listening to it. You press less, you guide more, you allow its imperfections to lead you into a form you hadn't imagined. And slowly, awkwardly, it begins to take shape. It's not beautiful, but it's honest. You glance at the potter. He nods once. When the piece is finished, he places it on a shelf beside your first cup. "This," he says, "is the cup of effort, of failure, of patience. Without it, the others mean less." You don't fully understand yet, but you feel something shift inside you. A deepening, a recognition that the journey of shaping, be it clay or self, is rarely clean, rarely smooth, and yet, it is sacred. Over the next few days, you return again and again, not to make cups, but to sit, to watch, to walk with him. He shows you how he gathers water, not from a well, but from rain. He explains that some seasons are dry, and others overflow, but that both teach you how to hold what comes. He tells you that some people come to him hoping for answers, but he offers none. "I don't teach answers," he says. "I teach room for them to arrive." One morning, you find the potter crouched by a broken piece of pottery. Not upset, just observing. "Do you know why I leave them here?" he asks. You shake your head, because even what shatters teaches us how to hold more gently. He lifts the piece and turns it in his hand, tracing the jagged edge with a finger. Abundance isn't about keeping things whole. It's about learning to find wholeness even when they're not. You don't speak. You simply sit with the broken piece beside you, your own hands open like the empty cups on his shelves. And in that stillness, a strange comfort arises, not from understanding everything, but from no longer needing to. The potter walks back to the wheel. You follow. This time, he doesn't hand you clay. He hands you a brush and a pale blue glaze. "Today," he says, "you paint what was already made." At first, it seems too easy, too simple, but the act of painting, of adding color to the form without changing its shape. Reminds you that sometimes, our role is not to make, but to honor what's been made. You trace the lines, you choose the tones, you learn that restraint is not weakness, it is wisdom. Not every surface needs decoration. Not every word needs to be spoken. The spaces between, the silences, they hold more than the noise ever could. By dusk, the potter places your glazed cup into the kiln. He turns to you and smiles. You're learning, he says, not just with your hands, but with your way of being. And once again, you leave the workshop, not with something new, but with something deeper, a remembering that what you call empty is often just ready. Ready to be filled, ready to teach, ready to remind you that abundance is not what you take in, but what you make room for. You wake earlier now. Something inside you stirs before the village even begins to hum, and you find yourself walking through the dewy grass as the first light of morning lifts the sky. You carry your empty cup with you, now solid, glazed, and smooth. It has become a kind of companion, not a tool, not a possession, but a quiet witness to your unfolding. Each morning, the potter waits. Sometimes he's tending the fire in the kiln, other times trimming the edge of a bowl. But he always looks up when you arrive, and you no longer need words between you. One day, he hands you a large lump of clay, too large for a single cup. Today, he says, we make something to hold more than one. You hesitate. A bowl? He smiles, but says nothing. You begin to shape the clay on the wheel, and as you do, your thoughts drift, uninvited but honest. You remember times in your life when you gave too much, when your own vessel felt depleted. You remember how you tried to fill yourself with things that never satisfied, achievements, possessions, applause, always trying to prove your worth by how much you could hold, how much you could offer. The potter watches as your hands falter, the rim of the bowl slumping unevenly. He doesn't correct you, he waits. You stop the wheel and look at the warped shape before you. You feel the sting of old habits, self-judgment, frustration, but before you can speak, he leans in gently and says, when you make something to hold others, you must first know what your own hands can carry. You nod slowly. The clay is soft enough to begin again. This time, you don't force it into symmetry. You let it curve as it wishes. The bowl that forms is irregular, asymmetrical, but balanced in its own way. It feels honest, and that is enough. As it dries, the potter tells you a story, not of his own life, but of a stream that once tried to rush too quickly. It flooded the fields, he says, not because it meant harm, but because it had forgotten the beauty of meandering. You think about the times you've rushed through life, rushed through love, rushed through grief, and how abundance often comes not in bursts, but in slow, quiet streams. The next day, the potter invites you to join him in the forest beyond the village. You walk in silence for some time, until he stops before a fallen tree. It lies rotting, its trunk hollow and softened by years of moss and insects. Yet, within that decay, wildflowers grow. A small rabbit watches you from a distance. Tiny mushrooms climb up the bark like lanterns in the dim light. This, he says, is an empty cup too. You tilt your head, unsure. It held life once, he continues. Now it holds a different kind of life. He kneels beside the tree and runs his hand over the bark. Nothing is truly empty if it welcomes what comes next. You sit with that for a long moment. Later, back at the workshop, he lets you use the trimming tools. You begin to refine the shape of your earlier pieces, not to perfect them, but to understand them more deeply. You scrape gently at the base of a cup, revealing a thin line of contrast between the glaze and the raw clay. It feels like uncovering a memory, like finding something familiar beneath what you thought you knew. In the corner of the studio, there's a collection of cups with no names, no owners. Some are chipped, others misshapen, but none are discarded. They're still learning. The potter says. He gestures for you to place your own cup among them. You hesitate. It's mine. He nods. But you are not finished. And neither is it. You leave the cup behind. Uncertain but trusting. That night, you lie awake longer than usual. The stars outside your window feel closer. The air, quieter. And your hands, resting on your chest, still feel the memory of clay between your fingers. You think of all the ways you've tried to fill your life with goals, with people, with stories. You think of the emptiness you once feared, and how, now, it feels like a friend sitting beside you in the dark. Not threatening, not hollow, just open. And for the first time in a long while, you don't resist it. You simply breathe, and you let the quiet in. In the morning, you return to the workshop with a different kind of awareness, not driven by curiosity or instruction, but by something more tender, more rooted. The world outside seems unchanged, but you, somehow, are not. The potter is already there, of course. He always is. Today he's not at the wheel or tending the kiln. He's sitting on a low bench, staring into the slow-burning fire that warms the studio, hands folded in his lap, as though listening to something deeper than sound. You sit beside him, quietly, for a long while. Neither of you speaks. The only sounds are the soft crackle of wood and the gentle wind pushing against the walls of woven reed. Finally, he turns and asks, "What are you carrying today?" The question lands differently than it might have before. He's not asking about burdens in the way most people do. Not about your worries or plans or tasks. He means, what lives inside you today? What fills the space of your inner cup? You think carefully before answering. "I'm carrying stillness," you say. He nods, then lifts a small, wide-mouthed bowl and places it between you. "Then today," he says, "we make something that listens." You frown gently. "A cup that listens?" He smiles, and you realize that this will not be a day for shaping with your hands, but with your heart. He brings out an old notebook, the pages stained and softened with age. Inside are sketches of vessels, some simple, some strange, some with spouts that spiral upward like vines or ears that seem too large for such delicate forms. Next to each sketch are words. "Receive without judgment. Open even when cracked. Honor the silence between things." These, he says, are not designs. They are postures. You run your finger across the lines. They feel more like poems than plans. Each vessel seems to echo something you've felt but never named. The potter asks you to draw your own. You hesitate. You don't consider yourself an artist. But he insists. So you begin. Your lines are hesitant at first. A shape that starts as a cup begins to tilt, stretch, and open like a flower. You sketch what looks like a vessel with one side folded inward and the other flaring outward, as if it's both giving and receiving at once. When you finish, the potter studies it for a while, then nods slowly. "This one listens," he says. "It hears not just what's said, but what's not." You glance down at the page, surprised by how familiar the form feels, as though you weren't inventing it, but remembering it. He tells you that listening is the most abundant act there is, not because it gathers, but because it creates space. To truly hear, he says, you must empty yourself of the need to respond, to fix, to impress. That is the hardest shape to hold. You spend the rest of the day walking through the village, not with a task, but with the intention to listen. You listen to the rustle of linen drying in the wind, the creak of a cart's wheels, the laughter of children echoing through alleyways. But most of all, you listen to people. An old man telling a story to his grandson, his voice gravelly but his eyes bright. A woman singing softly to herself as she arranges loaves of bread. A young boy weeping by the edge of a garden, hands muddy, one broken pot beside him. You sit beside the boy. You don't speak, you simply listen. He looks at you, surprised at first, then relieved. No advice, no scolding, just presence. Eventually, he sniffles and says, "It was my father's." You nod. He holds out a piece of the broken pot. "Do you think it can be fixed?" You look at the shard. And suddenly, you remember the potter's collection, the shelf of broken pieces he refused to throw away. "Yes," you say softly, "maybe not in the same way. But it can still hold something new." The boy smiles, just slightly, and together you gather the pieces. Back at the workshop, you show the potter. He says nothing, only places the pieces on the bench and begins boiling rice in a small pot. Once it's thick and starchy, he mixes in powdered clay and a dash of ash. The paste he creates is thick, sticky, and silvery when spread. "This is how I mend," he says, not to hide the break, but to honor it. You help him join the pieces together. One by one. It takes patience, it takes gentleness, and it takes faith in the unseen bonds that form when care is applied. When the pot is whole again, it is not what it was. But it is not less. In fact, it might be more. Later that evening, the potter places it beside the fire to dry. He turns to you and says, "Listening is mending. To truly hear someone is to hold space for them to become again." You nod, and for the first time, you understand the deeper work he does. He doesn't just make cups. He makes containers for silence, for sorrow, for returning. And now, so do you. You leave the workshop carrying nothing new. And yet, everything feels different, because you are no longer just learning to make empty cups. You are becoming one. You begin to notice how everything, the trees, the wind, the movement of your own breath, is shaped by what it holds and what it releases. You no longer rush to fill moments with noise or answers. You've become quieter inside, but not smaller, not emptied in the way you once feared. You feel spacious, capable of holding more, not because you've gathered more, but because you've made room. The potter sees this in you. He doesn't comment directly, but his eyes linger on you longer. His silence is deeper and warmer, like a soft nod from the soul. On this particular morning, he invites you to walk further than before, past the village, beyond the clay hills, to where the land flattens into a valley cradled by willows and quiet marshes. The light here is softer, filtered through mist and cattails. There's no sign of roads, only footpaths worn smooth by time and intention. He carries nothing with him. Neither do you. It feels like the right way to arrive. At the center of the marsh, hidden beneath a canopy of overgrown reeds, lies a stone well, ancient, moss-covered, half swallowed by the earth. The potter kneels beside it and brushes the moss with his fingers, as though greeting an old friend. "This is where I come," he says. "When I forget." You crouch beside him. Forget what? That emptiness is not a failure. He dips his hand into the cool water. "Some days I feel hollow, disconnected, as if everything I've poured into others has drained me dry. But this well, it reminds me." He cups some water in his hands and lets it trickle slowly between his fingers. "It reminds me that we are never the source," he says, "only the vessel, and the source is infinite." You sit with his words, letting them ripple through you. You've often tried to be everything to everyone, to provide, to fix, to be dependable, whole, complete, but in doing so, you've also feared becoming empty. You've feared that stillness meant something was wrong, that to pause was to fail. But now, watching the potter beside the ancient well, you begin to understand. It is the empty cup that receives the rain. He stands and begins gathering fallen willow branches. You help him without needing to ask why. Together, you weave a wide, shallow basket, an open vessel meant not to contain, but to offer. The potter ties reeds around the rim, adding a loop to hang it from a low tree branch. He lifts the basket gently and hangs it just above the water. "For the birds," he says, "for the passing wind, for anything that needs a place to land." You study the basket. It's crude, uneven, and yet, it sways beautifully, rhythmically, like it knows how to wait. As the day deepens, he leads you to a clearing where pieces of pottery lie half buried beneath the soil. He kneels again and begins to uncover them, cups, bowls, pitchers, all cracked, weathered, some nearly consumed by the earth. These were mine, he says softly, early works. I buried them here when I thought they weren't good enough. You feel your breath catch. Why did you leave them? Because I thought they had no value unless someone used them. Unless they were admired. He pauses. But the earth used them. The moss, the insects, rain filled them. Seeds nested in them. Life returned to them. You reach out and lift a broken bowl from the soil. Inside, a small cluster of wildflowers has taken root. The potter smiles. Even the forgotten pieces continue to give. You sit in that field for a long while, surrounded by remnants of what once was, and the quiet promise of what still can be. When you return to the workshop that evening, you notice something different on the shelf. Among all the cups, there is now one turned upside down. You ask the potter why. He says, because sometimes, even the vessel needs rest. You stare at it, understanding in a way you wouldn't have before. Not every moment must be about holding, giving, doing. There is wisdom in pausing, in not always being available, in honoring your own edge. Later, he invites you to shape a cup again, but this time, you begin with a question rather than a goal. What do I need to hold right now? You ask inwardly. And with that, your hands move, not with precision, but with presence. The clay bends beneath your fingers like it trusts you now. You don't control it, you collaborate with it, and when the form appears, a small, narrow cup with a flared lip, you realize something quietly profound. This one is for yourself. Not selfishly, not in greed, but as a gentle declaration that your needs are sacred too. The potter says nothing, but when you place the cup on the bench, he traces its rim with one finger and whispers, "You're remembering now." That night, you sit with the cup by your window. The moonlight spills into it gently, as if blessing it, as if saying, "Yes, you too deserve to be filled." You fall asleep not empty, not full, but open, and in the stillness, something within you begins to sing. The next morning, the village is blanketed in a gentle fog, softening every edge and muting every sound. The world feels quiet, suspended, like a breath held just before a long, slow exhale. You walk through it slowly, your feet barely making a sound on the stone path, as though not to disturb the hush that has descended. When you arrive at the potter's workshop, you find him not inside, but sitting just beyond the entrance, facing the mist-draped hills. His hands rest in his lap, empty, but not idle. You sit beside him wordlessly, the silence between you vast and kind. After a while, he speaks. Most people think abundance is something you earn. You wait. They chase it, he says, like it's out there, like it's somewhere they'll arrive if they just try harder. Do more. Become better. You nod slowly. You've known that chase. You've run it. But what if abundance, he continues, is not the prize at the end of effort, but the place we begin? Once we stop running, he turns to you, and his gaze is clear and still, like water that hasn't been disturbed in years. You were born abundant, he says, before anyone asked you to prove it. You feel a swell in your chest, a sudden, quiet grief, for all the years you spent trying to earn what was never in question. For the parts of yourself you silenced to become worthy of love, praise, safety, for the way you've been taught that only what you give has value, never what you simply are. And for the first time in the potter's presence, your eyes brim with tears. He doesn't comfort you. He doesn't need to. He simply sits with you, cup-like, open, willing to hold what overflows. Later, inside the studio, he shows you a new technique. It involves breaking a cup, not by accident, but intentionally. He wraps one of his old cups in cloth, then gently taps it with a wooden mallet until it cracks into 4 large pieces. You flinch, even though the blow was soft. "This," he says, "is the beginning of something else." You watch as he begins fitting the pieces back together, not hiding the cracks, but emphasizing them with molten gold. He paints along the fractures with steady hands, the gleaming lines shining even as the cup regains its shape. "This is kintsugi," he says, "a tradition born in the East, a way of seeing brokenness as part of the story, not a flaw to be erased, but a feature to be honored." You stare at the restored cup. It's more beautiful now than it was before it shattered. "Abundance," he says, "isn't found in perfection. It's in the willingness to continue, to return to your own pieces with gentleness." He places the golden cracked cup in your hands. It's heavier than it looks, as though it carries not just form, but memory. You realize then that you, too, are a cup repaired, and the lines that run through your story, those scars, those regrets, those moments when you thought you had nothing left, those are the gold. They are not the evidence of lack. They are the testimony of survival. That afternoon, the potter shows you how to fire pieces in an open pit. There's something raw about it, primitive and exposed. The pieces are placed carefully in a pit dug into the earth, surrounded by dry wood, and then set alight. The fire roars. It blackens the ground. Smoke rises into the sky in dark, solemn plumes. You sit beside the flame with your knees drawn to your chest, the heat licking at your skin. "Transformation always costs something," he says over the crackling, "but it gives back more." You nod. You think about everything that has burned in your life. Dreams abandoned, friendships faded, versions of yourself that no longer fit. You used to grieve those losses as empty spaces. Now, you begin to see them as the fire that forged you. After the flames die down, the potter removes the ash gently, revealing the vessels beneath, darkened, imperfect, but strong. Each one wears the fire differently. Some are scorched, some are marbled with smoke, but each is unique in its finish. No two are alike. Every piece, he says, takes from the fire what it needs. You reach for the one you made earlier, the cup you shaped for yourself. It's darker now, its surface kissed by ash, its lip slightly warped from the heat. But it feels more you than anything you've ever made. That evening, you and the potter share tea in the golden cracked cup. You sit across from him in silence, sipping slowly, letting the warm liquid linger on your tongue. "This tea tastes richer today," you say softly. He smiles, because now, you drink it with all of yourself. You look down at the cup in your hands. It is empty again, but not lacking. It is ready. You realize then, all along, these cups were never meant to hold things forever. They were meant to be emptied, to be used, to be lived through. Because it is not in the keeping that we find abundance. It is in the pouring, and in the quiet that follows. You finally hear your own heart say, "I am enough." The fog lifts by morning, revealing a landscape that feels both unchanged and somehow entirely new. The village is the same winding paths, the same stone houses, the same distant chimes from the bell tower, but you, standing in the golden hush of dawn, feel utterly transformed. You no longer walk to the potter's workshop out of habit or hunger. You go because it feels like home. Not a place, but a rhythm, a way of being. Today, when you arrive, the potter is preparing a gathering. Not a crowd, no banners, no announcements, no noise, just a slow coming together of villagers, an elderly woman with trembling hands, a farmer still dusted with earth, a shy girl clutching a broken necklace. They come with nothing, and somehow, that is everything. The potter gestures for you to help him arrange the empty cups, your cups, his, and the nameless ones from the shelf. Each is placed on a long wooden table set beneath the wide branches of a blossoming tree. The tree offers dappled light, the kind that flickers like candle glow. You ask what the occasion is. He replies with a warm chuckle. "Gratitude, nothing more." There's no ceremony, no speeches, just stillness. People sit together. They hold the cups in their hands. Some sip tea poured from a steaming kettle. Others hold the cups silently, gazing into them as if searching the bottom for something long forgotten. You sit too, cup in hand, and observe. The woman with trembling hands leans close to the farmer, her voice like silk on stone. "This cup," she says, "feels like my husband's old hands. Worn, but warm." The farmer nods, then lifts his cup. "Mine feels like the first time I planted something and believed it would grow." Even the shy girl, fingers still wrapped around her broken necklace, finally speaks. "Mine," she whispers, "feels like the silence after a long cry." No one judges the words. No one adds more than what's offered. The cups seem to speak for themselves, drawing out stories not through pressure, but invitation. You turn to the potter. Why do they feel so much from so little? He smiles. Because most people are not starved for things. They are starved for space. He pours a small stream of tea into your cup, the steam curling upward like a blessing. "We think we long for more," he continues, "but what we often need is less. Less noise, less proving, less pressure to be anything other than fully, quietly alive." You sip the tea. It's the same blend you've had for days now. But today it tastes like a memory. The first time you felt understood. The first time you dared to rest. The first time you realized you didn't have to fill every silence. You rise from the table and begin walking among the gathered, cup in hand, not to serve, not to teach, but to simply be. You sit beside the girl with the necklace. You walk with the farmer as he shows you a scar on his forearm, an old story carved into skin. You help the old woman stand when her knees protest. And with every shared breath, every unspoken moment, you feel more whole. Later, as the sun begins to fall behind the hills, the potter gathers everyone near the table once more. He lifts a single empty cup, the one you made days ago. The one you left on his shelf. "This," he says, "was shaped not to be filled with tea, but with presence, with story, with stillness, and with you." He holds the cup out to you. You step forward and take it, your fingers fitting the curve like returning to a home you didn't know you missed. "You don't need to stay here," the potter says. "You don't even need to carry the cup, but you'll carry what it taught you." You nod. There are no tears, only clarity, only warmth, because you understand now. The cup was never the lesson. You were the one who learned to be still, who learned to shape without forcing, who learned that emptiness was not something to fear, but something to honor, to hold, to celebrate. That night, as the gathering dissolves into quiet goodbyes and slow footsteps back toward the village, you remain for a while beneath the tree, your cup resting in your lap. You hear the wind moving through the leaves. You feel the way your heart no longer rushes to speak, but waits. And somewhere, in the space between breaths, you understand that abundance has never been a distant place. It is this moment, this silence, this open hand, this cup, ready again. Morning finds you not at the wheel, but by the doorway of the workshop, watching the sun rise slow and deliberate across the fields. It paints everything gold, the dew, the rooftops, the old wooden bench where you once sat uncertain and hollow. The potter is already awake, sweeping the floor with careful strokes. When he sees you, he nods, not a greeting, but a recognition. You are no longer a guest here. You are part of the space. "I think I'm ready," you say. He doesn't ask what you mean. He doesn't need to. Instead, he sets down the broom and gestures toward a shelf where your cup rests among others. They're all different, some wide, some slender, some uneven, but each one carries its own kind of silence. Your cup stands among them not as a student's work, but as a voice of its own. "Take it," he says, "and offer it, offer it." The word lands inside you like a soft bell ringing. You walk into town that afternoon with your cup wrapped in cloth. tucked gently into a satchel. People pass you by, some rushing, some lost in thought, some with eyes so heavy you wonder what burdens they carry. You see them now, really see them, not as strangers but as vessels. 2. Each shaped by time, by loss, by hope. At a small park bench beneath a tree, you pause. A woman sits nearby, her hands trembling slightly as she tries to steady a thermos. Her eyes are red, her breathing shallow. You sit beside her, quiet, present. She notices you eventually and offers a tired smile. "Sorry," she murmurs. "Rough morning." You nod. Then slowly, you reach into your bag and pull out the cup. "I made this," you say softly, placing it between you. She looks at it, then at you, confused. "Why are you giving it to me?" "Because you look like someone who might need room for something new." She touches the rim of the cup with fingers hesitant and reverent, as though afraid to break it. "It's empty," she whispers. You smile. "That's the gift." For a long time, she just holds it, doesn't ask questions, doesn't offer thanks. And that's enough. The exchange isn't transactional, it's transformational. You're not filling her cup. You're reminding her that she still has space within herself to hold something beautiful. And you realize, this is how abundance moves. Not through noise, not through grand gestures, but through quiet acts of offering what's empty so that others may begin again. You return to the workshop later that day. The potter doesn't ask what you did. He simply looks at your empty hands and smiles. "You shared what you feared to hold," he says. "That is the beginning of wisdom." That evening, you find a scrap of parchment and begin to write, not instructions, not teachings, but reflections, not for publication, not for praise. Just the act of writing feels like shaping something unseen. You jot down. The empty cup teaches us that fullness is not about what we keep, but what we're ready to give. That true giving is not about sacrifice, but about the joy of making space for someone else's becoming. The ink dries slow in the fading light. You've made dozens of cups by now, but this is the first time you understand that none of them belong to you. They were never meant to stay. Cups are made to leave your hands. Just like stories, just like grace, just like love. And as the wind brushes gently against the windows, you know that every step forward from here will be guided by a quiet truth. You are not here to impress. You are here to offer. And in that offering, you are made whole. The days stretch into a quiet rhythm. Mornings begin with clay beneath your fingernails and the sound of the potter humming some melody you don't recognize, but have come to love. Evenings end with silence and the warmth of tea cupped in your palms. But in between, those long, sunlit hours, you are crafting. You no longer shape the clay to prove something. Not to him, not to yourself. You've stopped asking whether it's good enough. Instead, your hands move with a kind of peace, like rivers that have learned their course not by knowing, but by flowing. And what surprises you most is that you love making empty things. Bowls, jars, vessels, cups, all hollow, all spacious, but none of them feel void. They feel alive. They hum with potential. You no longer fear the emptiness. You welcome it. It's where things begin, where hope lives, where breath returns. One afternoon, a child visits the studio with her grandfather. She watches you work for a long time, her eyes wide and curious. "Why don't you make statues?" she finally asks. "Or animals? Or castles?" You smile. "Because I like making things that can hold something else." She tilts her head, puzzled. "Like what?" "Like water, or soup, or light, or someone's secrets." She giggles. "Secrets? Sometimes people need a place to pour out what they're carrying." She thinks for a moment, then leans in and whispers, "I talk to my teddy bear at night, but he's always full of fluff. I think he can't hold any more secrets." You laugh, soft and full. "Then maybe you need a cup." And so, you help her make one. It's wobbly and uneven, with a rim that dips too far on one side. But she names it Whisper. And when she leaves, clutching it like a treasure, you feel something inside you widen. Later that week, the potter invites you to display your cups at the village market. You hesitate at first, unsure if you're ready to share this part of you with strangers. But he looks at you, eyes kind and knowing. It's not about selling, he says. It's about making space. So you go. You set up a small table with no signs, no prices, just cups. Some tall, some wide, some glazed in soft blues and greens, some left raw and honest. And beside each one, a small card that simply says, for whatever you need to make room for. People stop, they look, some pick up a cup and turn it slowly in their hands. One woman begins to cry and doesn't say why. A man offers you a quiet nod before slipping a small stone into the hollow of a cup and walking away. You make no demands, you expect no payment, yet by the end of the day, every cup has found a home. Every single one. You return to the studio with empty boxes and a full heart. That night, you sit alone by the kiln, the glow of old coals warming your skin, and it dawns on you, this joy you found isn't in the clay. It's in what the clay makes possible. You're not just creating objects. You're creating invitations. Invitations for people to slow down, to listen, to let go, to begin again. And maybe, you think, that's what the potter has been doing all along, not just teaching you to craft, but gently guiding you toward the sacred act of offering space. Not everyone needs to be taught, but everyone, in some way, needs to be held. And that's what these empty things are. Hollow homes, soft shelters, places for the unseen to rest a while. You lift a cup from the shelf and hold it to your heart. It feels like purpose, and it hums. By now, you've seen the potter's story unfold like the firing of a delicate porcelain, slow, deliberate, full of invisible alchemy. You walk into his workshop one last time, not as a visitor, but as someone transformed. The smell of clay and ash no longer feels foreign. It welcomes you like an old friend. On the table today is a single, unfinished cup. Unlike the others, it's lopsided and glazed only halfway, as if he stopped mid-creation. You instinctively reach out to touch it, and your fingers feel the roughness of its surface. Why didn't he finish this one? You wonder. And then, as if time bends inward, the potter's voice rises within you, not spoken aloud, but echoing softly from the folds of memory. That cup. That's for you to finish. You close your eyes. Suddenly, you see the potter not as an old man but as a boy shaping mud along a riverbank. You see the heartbreak of his younger years, his father's absence. The hunger, the way the world confused scarcity for punishment. You see the moment he crafted his first empty bowl and offered it to a stranger. Not because it was full, but because it had space enough for another's hunger. The potter understood something that most missed entirely. That emptiness is not a lack but a beginning. That the hollow of a cup is where giving begins. That abundance isn't something you fill up, it's what you make room for. You remember the cups he gave to others, each one matched to their thirst, their need, their journey. You remember how their faces changed, not from what the cups gave them, but from what they realized they had to offer in return. Each cup was a mirror turned inside out. You feel your own cup now, not in your hand, but in your heart. It has always been there. And for the first time, you do not rush to fill it. You sit beside it, you listen. That's when you begin to sense it, an abundance not of possessions or victories, but of space, the kind of space that welcomes, that holds, that forgives, the kind of space that lets a wound breathe, that lets grief weep in silence, that lets joy echo louder than fear. It's the abundance of breath, of pause, of presence. You leave the potter's home without fanfare. No final goodbye, no grand parting gift, just a knowing, a silent nod to the stars. And as you walk back through your own life, the world begins to look different. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You begin to notice all the cups you've been given, some chipped, some perfect, some empty, some overflowing. And then you begin to see the ones you've offered others, and you wonder, were they full of me? Or did I make space for them? You make tea that evening. You pour it slowly. You hold the cup a moment longer than usual before you drink. You offer the next cup to a friend, not because they need tea, but because you now understand that offering a cup is sometimes how you say, there is space for you in my life. The days move on, but the rhythm is different. You've slowed just enough to notice a child's laughter echoing through the hallway, to feel the warmth of sun resting on your face, to hold silence without fear of what it may reveal. And when life offers you an empty moment, a pause between plans, a loss, a quiet room, you no longer rush to fill it. You breathe into it. You respect its shape. You cradle it like the potter cradled clay. Because now, you understand, the potter was never teaching how to make cups. He was showing how to live empty enough for abundance to find you.